coming up today on the Nice Guys on Business.
I think that is the key. Bring people together, identify your super fans, and give them the autonomy and the love and the care so they can get elevated. When you reward your champions, man, like 1% of your audience will drive the love for everyone else. They'll bring more people.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss the Nice Guys on Business. I'll have what the Nice Guys on Business are having. Go from where you are now to where you could be. Get expert tips to grow your business, to be more productive and more efficient, whether you're trying to build influence, grow your community, or make it rain. Best-selling author of Nice Guys Finish First, Doug Sandler, can lead the way. The Nice Guys on Business is produced by TurnKey Podcast Productions. Now, here's your host, Doug Sandler.
All right, Nice Guy community. He's been covered in Fox Business, TechCrunch, SF Business Journal, Forbes, and many other publications. Lloyed Lobo is an entrepreneur and podcast host who experienced the Gulf War as a young refugee in Kuwait. Lloyd leveraged the community-led growth model and bootstrapped to 8-figure revenue, then secured over $100 million in capital. Lloyd is the author of From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands with Community-Led Growth. The book topped Amazon's new release charts in various categories, including startups and business technology, within hours of its pre-sale launch. Looking forward to this talk today. Welcome, Lloyd, to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
What great energy, Doug. Thanks for hosting me. Thanks for bringing me on. You bring out the energy you give out. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, I brought you on here selfishly because I'm like, okay, what ideas can I steal from Lloyd in order to take this business from this mid-6-figure? I don't want to say it's dull and lull because I love our business. I love our clients. We have about 70 amazing clients. How do I get from 70 clients to 170 clients and then, $1 million plus revenue stream? How do you do that and still maintain that? I love what you said earlier that when we were talking before I hit record, that 1-to-1 or 0-to-1 relationship. How do you get there and build a business at the same time?
Definitely. For me, it's all about starting with something you love. Right? Starting with the passion. There's any number of things you can do, but building a community and building a business is a marathon of the heart and mind. It's a grind. It's a long slog. Anything worth doing takes a while. And, you might get lucky along the way sometimes, like in Instagram, although I don't know if they were lucky. They worked really hard. But doing anything is a long slog. You better pick something you draw joy from. Pick an audience that you love, because if you don't, it's going to make the journey worse, right? And as I look back, actually, when we started the company, when we started Boast, my co-founder and I had been best friends since university. We were partners in every project. One day he called me out of the blue, said, I want to start a company in this. I jumped at the opportunity. Now, I was in San Francisco and he was in Calgary. Neither of us were from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, but his wife was articling in Calgary. She just finished law school, so he happened to be there. My wife was doing a fellowship at Stanford in San Francisco. And because he was the brains behind the product, his idea and his experience is what got it started. So I said, I'll move in with you in Calgary. We go to Calgary. I live out of his spare bedroom. That's where we started the company out of. Well, the first thing you do is, my experience was, hey, before you even start building, talk to customers. And so we started by just cold calling people, manufacturing, oil and gas, construction, you name it. People that would pay you money, anyone that would listen. And our product was different than what other people would sell, right? We were taking people's R&D data and getting them money from the government. Globally, hundreds of billions of dollars are given in funding for innovation, R&D. But the application process is cumbersome. It's prone to frustrating audits, and it takes a long time to get the money. So we started reaching out saying, hey, we'll get you money from the government. It's non-dilutive, no interest, but you got to give us your R&D data. Two guys calling you get a call like that, you're going to think it's a scam. Or if you know about it, you're like, I'm going to do it with my Big Four accounting firm or my accountant.
Right.
And so we kept calling and we kept running into this problem. And so we said, you know what, why don't we just go and hit up the manufacturing events, construction, oil and gas events. And we started going to these events and we just couldn't resonate, right? It felt like an old boys club. And we were two young guys who looked like they threw on a suit jacket on top of their hoodies and didn't feel like our tribe, didn't feel like our people. And so when we kept getting rejection after rejection, dejected, we started going to all the startup events. And when we started going to the startup events, we felt like, hey, we found our tribe. Now, see, we were two guys who are not in our towns, right? We went to this new city to start this company. And so when we started meeting the startup founders, they were very welcoming. We started having great conversations. And now we had no other friends there. So over the following weeks, those startup founders started becoming friends of ours. We started partying with them, hanging out with them, doing dinners with them, participating in hackathons with them. And looking back, when you have any success, looking back, everything feels like a profound framework or a learning. When you're in there in the time, it feels like you're throwing spaghetti on the wall. So a lot of people ask me, where do I start? And I'm like, you got to start by figuring out, who do you target even? You don't have a product. You don't have an idea. How do I start? Figure out, who do you target? So how do you land on who you even should target? And looking back, it boils down to four things. One, pick an industry that you're passionate about, that you can resonate with, because to create for an audience that you hate is going to be very difficult. And even
agreed.
Even if you do it in the short term, you will not be able to sustain, because the first time a problem hits, you're going to start cursing at your customers, right? Like internally, it's hard to sustain. The next thing is pick a niche that may be small, but underserved and growing. The startup market at the time in 2012 for us was underserved. It was small. It was growing. Now, a lot of our competitors would say, you guys are going to go bankrupt because startups don't pay. And we tell them, listen, your customers won't work with us, the manufacturing, oil and gas, the bigger companies, and you won't serve these guys. And that's our tribe. So the only thing we can do is serve our own and hope that it works out.
Right.
So pick a market you love, you can vibe with, you can resonate, because it's a long haul, small underserved niche that's growing. The third one is propensity pay. And the last one is ease of access. You may love the market and it could be large and growing and they have a great propensity to pay. But if you don't have the ease of access, you won't get anywhere. So, the exercise is going to be futile. So we started with that, like picking the market we love to serve. And then it was all about understanding that market, figuring out where they ate, where they breathe, where they drink, where they sleep, understanding their problems and goals, but also understanding their aspirations. The thing is, a lot of us latch onto problems and goals, but they may be short-term, right? Like a problem may not exist tomorrow, or a goal may be accomplished, but an aspiration is a forever. It's a long-term. So figure out what that aspiration is in addition to the problems and goals, and what stands in their way. And just from us going around the startup community, hanging out with them, going to their events, partying with them, eating with them, breaking bread, participating in hackathons, we got a great sense of what their goals, their aspirations were, what stood in their way. And once you have that, you could probably come up with 100 burning questions they face. And, imagine if you had to write the ultimate guide to get to X aspirations, what would be the chapters, the sub-chapters, and the key topics, right? That gives you a good understanding of the audience. So that's how we started. And what's really interesting, I feel fortunate to start in 2012 in some ways versus today in 2023, because in 2023, we've become very platform dependent, right? Like LinkedIn and Instagram and all of these tools, they're great at building audiences. But the issue, Doug, is you don't own those audiences. If the algorithm changes, you don't have their emails. You don't have their phone numbers. Even with podcasting, right? We have a podcast, but we don't know who our listeners are. I mean, we hope we know our numbers, but those are all ego metrics. They help soothe us as like, oh, well, we have a million listeners or whatever it is. But until we know one of those people, we actually have nothing, because as soon as Apple changes how they work their search mechanism, or Spotify changes something, we could be SOL and it would be completely gone tomorrow, and we don't have any recourse. Exactly, right? You don't know who that audience is. And what's worse is when you look at social platforms, they're fantastic at building audiences, but you don't own that audience. So most social platforms, what they do initially is they show your content to your followers. As soon as the platform starts to gain traction, then they start showing your followers other people's content and then sponsored content, and your mind share starts to go down. So NAS Daily is a very popular YouTube channel and Instagram, Facebook, but they had a Facebook group with 21 million followers, which would probably get like 50% engagement. 50% of the audience would see all their content. And I think in the last year or so, Facebook changed their algorithm, and now 5% of the audience started seeing their content, and their revenues went from like $100,000 a month to like bupkis. And so if they didn't build this community in parallel through events, through WhatsApp groups, through newsletters, they would be crying right now. If it was a business, they would have failed. But luckily, they had other avenues. So I think it's important to understand that platforms are algorithmic and algorithm dependent, and these platforms eventually need to make money. And so you need to go beyond the platform. Hey, I have an audience. How do I collect that contact information to turn that audience into a community? Now, for us, we were fortunate because we're at a time where LinkedIn for content distribution wasn't prevalent, B2B at least. Podcasting wasn't very prevalent in 2012. A lot of the content people would consume to gain business knowledge was through blogs and meetups, events, etc. Now, in 2012, when we started pounding the pavement, going to events and meeting and understanding these startup founders, we found actually 2 white spaces. And that is very important, finding 1 or 2 white space. White space 1 was all the events we went to, the content was very sort of high-level CEO platitudes, right? Bringing a CEO of a $50, $100 million company, while is very inspiring, a founder who's decided to go on the journey and start their company is at 0 or 1, that inspiration is not helpful to me. Maybe once or twice I'll listen to an inspirational talk, but what do I need? I need the content that'll be tactical for me. How do I get my first customers? How do I figure out how to launch a product? How do I figure out a specific marketing channel? How do I get my first enterprise deal or first angel investment? That kind of conversation wasn't happening. And I guess it wasn't because event organizers were organizing those events and those meetups. It wasn't being organized by founders. Right. So that was white space number 1. The white space number 2 was the local media wouldn't cover startups. Other service providers wouldn't give startups love. And like I said, anyone we talked to would say, hey, you guys are going to go belly up because startups don't pay, so we don't care about this market. Now, I think one of the best ways to win is to have a contrarian bet and be right, because fast forward 2023, the startup market has exploded, and all these competitors who were saying, oh, you guys are crazy for serving startups are now offering startup programs, right? Like startup discounts, startup programs, because it's a market that grows. Ultimately, innovation always wins. If you keep investing in innovation, you're going to grow. In the last 15 years, more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies have evaporated because they don't innovate, right? You follow innovation, that segment will grow. So what we did was we said, hey, you know what? We've been in and around startups before. We know people who can share tactical advice. And for a founder who's like at 0 to 1, you need tactical advice. You don't need the CEO platitude from a $50 million company. If you're at 0 to 1, I'm better off listening to somebody who's gotten to 5, 10 million in revenue, and they can speak more tactically to me. So we started by hosting meetups. And I honestly feel very fortunate for the time we were in, because that enabled us to collect email addresses. So we started hosting meetups. And so our messaging went immediately from buy my stuff to saying, hey, Doug, you're just starting out. We're bringing another founder who just got to 5 million in revenue, and they're going to talk about how they got their first million in revenue, exact steps, or got their first angel investor, or how they were able to build their first prototype with just contractors. So that first meetup, we invited 10 people, or we had 10 spots. We invited a lot of people. We said we had 10 spots at the co-working space, free pizza. 10 people showed up.
Hey, pizza, you're in.
Free pizza, right? And 10 people, free pizza. You could get by in 2012 with like $9.99, those deals. The next meetup we did 15 people showed up, 20 people showed up. Every time we did a meetup, more and more people show up. The key there was consistency. We never stopped. And one day at the co-working space, we had 200 people show up.
Wow.
And the guys running the co-working space are like, listen, you've hijacked the aisles. It's not a meetup anymore, and you need to get out of here. You're like running now full-blown conferences, hijacking the aisles for free, but you can't do this. You can't disrupt the space. In parallel, what I did was I reached out to the local newspaper and asked them to give me a column to cover startups, because I knew that if I wrote it on our blog, it would take a long time for the SEO juice to hit. Like it would take a year or so. And with startups, when you're starting a company, you don't have that time. The local newspaper said, it's not of interest to us. It's not a market we target. I kept following up, right? And they said, it's not of interest. So what I did was reach out to some friends, wrote for some second tier blogs, and shared it with my friend circle covering other entrepreneurs. And those posts went viral on Twitter. So I followed up with the editor and said, hey, look at this recent post I did on this other blog, which targets a different demographic, a younger startup-oriented small business demographic. And they're like, yeah, you're getting a lot of traffic. The retweets tell a great story. We'll give you a column, but it's going to be just a blog. Now, I'm like, what blog could I write that would go viral? I do know that this community in this city, people are craving for attention from media. The startup community is. So I wrote a column called Startup of the Week because it creates this like, oh, it's an award, it's a recognition, and it's on the newspaper blog. And I covered this entrepreneur who went crazy. He's like, wow, the local newspaper called me Startup of the Week. They shared the hell out of it. It got even more traffic than the second tier blogs I shared. I kid you not, within 2 days, the editor called me and he said, listen, if you commit to writing it every week, I'll give you a print column. Now, I'm not getting paid for this.
Right.
I'll give you a print column.
You're driving traffic to his publication, but he's not paying you though.
He's not paying me. I didn't care to get paid. I cared about like, hey, how do I now create visibility and credibility for myself? We're two obscure guys. Nobody have heard of our business. It's a product that requires a lot of credibility because it's a trust factor. You're giving me your IP in order for me to get you money from the government. So I needed that instant credibility. We needed that instant credibility. And so when we started writing that column now, it sparked three or four things. Number one, it gave me SEO from the highest domain authority website in the country. It was the national newspaper website, right? And week over week, when you're getting backlinks from a high domain authority website, you get that link juice, your domain authority jumps up. And so our SEO starting to go up. Number two, put a Wufoo form in there saying, if you'd like to be featured, fill out this form. Mm-hmm. So we started getting email subscribers. People would reach out. So this was the boomerang effect. People would fill out the form. We'd invite them to our meetups. More people would fill out the form. We'd invite them to the meetups. The third thing was instant credibility. Even today, print is print. Despite most people don't buy a print newspaper, as soon as you say you're in print on the newspaper, people feel like it's more credible because blogs are now dime a dozen, right? You're right. A print newspaper. So we got credibility, and it sparked this other interesting thing where every Monday morning at like 6 or 7 a.m., the entrepreneurs would go to the local newsstand, buy a number of copies, and take pictures and share it. So this boomerang effect of people applying now to be featured and then us inviting them to the meetup started growing our email database. And it built a social proof to then get our first customers, eventually build partnerships and whatnot. So what were the key lessons there? I mean, started with, hey, figure out who you should target based on the love for that industry, the passion for it, and the size of the market, ease of access, propensity to pay. Then understand everything about them, their goals, their needs, their aspirations, what stands in their way. Then the third step is figuring out their circle of influence. Once you understand the ideal customer profile and what kind of content they would love to consume based on a white space they're not getting anywhere else, figure out the circle of influence. Who do they fund? Meaning, what are the tools they pay for? When you have a list of that, that means those are people you can partner with. Those are people you can co-host events with. Those are people who would sponsor your content. Who do they follow? Meaning, who are the influencers they listen to, they respect? Those could be people you feature in your blogs. Those could be people you invite on your podcast, invite as guest speakers. And the last one is, what do they frequent? Meaning, what platforms they hang out on, what blogs, magazines they read. That way, you know where else to distribute your content. That also means who you should invite in terms of like content partners. So for our events, we started inviting TechCrunch because TechCrunch was a publication read a lot. So we started inviting TechCrunch to moderate the sessions. I didn't need to hog the stage. I invite now Frederic from TechCrunch comes to every single event, conference of ours, and he'll moderate 3 or 4 sessions. So now when your ICP comes to this event, your ideal customer profile comes to an event you host, they feel like it's their tribe, right? Hey, I listen to all these speakers, or I follow them, I respect them. TechCrunch is there. I buy tools from these service providers. All of a sudden, they feel like they're part of, they've met their tribe, versus you show up to an event, like, and this happens a lot, right? You get invited to an event, you show up, and you meet like people you don't know or nothing in common, like the manufacturing or oil and gas events we're going, and then you check out, you leave immediately. So that was the early days. And I'm thankful for that, because we were forced to collect email addresses because we needed to build those relationships and grow, right? And if you don't have people's email addresses, how do you grow? Like, email has driven me so much, from growing the community, growing the newsletter, to reaching out to people to buy my product, to even the book. When we put it on pre-sale, I reached out to the community and said, hey, well, the book's on pre-sale, would love your support. And people went and bought it, and it became a top new release for a couple of weeks. So I think those starting points are key.
So tell me, and I appreciate your answer and the details. And for those who in our Nice Guy community understand that this is exactly why Lloyd has become to the level of success where he has been. He understands the early stage. It doesn't sound like you've forgotten anything about those early stages, and you're humbled by the early stage also, in spite of the level of success that you have reached. It is still all about, how do I go back to some of the basics? I mean, even something as simple as, I've got to get back on and do one-on-one interviews. I don't, and Lloyd's not saying this, I'm saying this about Lloyd. He doesn't need to do this anymore. He doesn't need to. The beauty is he wants to do it because this is where the growth comes from. The growth comes from, listen to the title of his book, From Grassroots to Greatness. That's where you get greatness from. It's got to start. And you really never should leave those grassroots if you always want to come back to the reason why you started the business. Is that why you wrote the book? Just to remember a little bit more about those early stages? Or tell me a little bit about the origin of the book.
Definitely. So, what's really interesting is all my life I had no money. Okay. So I'll go back to my origin story real quick.
Yeah.
So I was born in Kuwait. My parents were from India. They moved to Kuwait because the money wasn't good in India and they needed the currency to make work for them so they could take money back home, right? And back then, they weren't educated enough. They couldn't get to the West. So they moved to Kuwait. The benefit of being in Kuwait is tax-free money. Everything is savings. They can send it back home. So I was born in Kuwait. But the thing is, my mom grew up in the slums of Mumbai. And she had 9 other siblings. And all my summer, every summer in my childhood, we couldn't afford to go to Europe or anything. So when you work in the Middle East, in addition to making tax-free money, all employers give you and your family round-trip tickets back home. Home was India. So every summer, we couldn't afford to go anywhere else. So we'd capitalize on those free round-trip tickets, and I'd spend my summers as a kid in the slums of Mumbai. Now, the beauty of that was, people had very little. People had almost nothing, right? It's 4 walls, which is like concrete blocks with like an aluminum roof. 10 kids staying in this house. My mom was one of the oldest kids. Watching TV was communal. Every 4 or 5 homes had a TV. Now, my mom was in Kuwait, so she could afford to send TV home. Going to the bathroom was communal. There's no toilet in the house. So you're standing in line waiting for the public restroom. It would rain all the time in the summer and puddles would turn into ponds. But my fondest memories as a child was that communal experience in the slums, playing together, hanging out together, eating together, where you make a little extra and you pass it to the next door. You're watching TV, but there's no view, right? So your window backs onto the next to the little gully in between two houses. So people are hanging and watching. And it was a lot of fun. And every summer when we had to go back to Kuwait, I would cry. And I just didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay there. Fast forward a few years, Kuwait was struck by the Gulf War. Security had lapsed. That was a time where there was no internet. There were no cell phones. Phone connections were cut. No internet, no cell phones. And I got to witness something really exceptional, unbelievable. When I went down the building that day with my dad, this was a time where stress should have been at an all-time high, right? In 2023, when a problem hits, it festers and festers and it belabors and it turns into new monsters, right? Bad news just perpetuates. But back then, it's like, okay, this is a problem, but let's get together to solve it. Every building became a sub-community, and somebody is like, I'll guard the building from 12 to 6. Somebody else is like, I'll guard it from 6 to 12. Another person is like, I'll join you. Another person's like, hey, I'll organize food supply. Somebody else is like, if you have displaced family members, I'll make some room in my house. Another person knew somebody at the school. So they're like, hey, there's no school, so we'll turn that into like a camp to house people. Every building became a sub-community. Word of mouth spread, building over building, communicated with embassies, with governments, and probably became the largest evacuation movement to rescue people to safety, taking them from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan, refugee camps. And me, as an 8-year-old, I felt like little Rambo. I felt so connected to that purpose that I was just running alongside people, staying up all night on security watches. And I just felt so connected to that purpose. And it taught me two very valuable things. One, the power of community in creating impact, the power of, no matter how big a task, if people are motivated and energized by a great purpose, they can move mountains. The second thing was the entrepreneurial spirit. When we talk about entrepreneurship today, it's about making money. But really what the entrepreneurship spirit is, taking an obscure idea to execution and impact while dealing with extreme risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity. No other risky, ambiguous situation than you're going through a war trying to get to safety. Fast forward a few years, we moved to Canada. I get into engineering, graduate. I just didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job. I didn't want to be coding behind a desk. And as I asked around for what the best skill would be to get into entrepreneurship, it always came up as communication, sales, communication. And so I started applying to sales jobs. Nobody hires me. Begged my way and got into startups, right? Started doing cold calling for a startup. Next job ended up being working in sales now, gone from cold calling to working in sales for another startup. But when I started there wasn't really a repeatable, scalable product or a process. So I needed to figure out what to build by talking to customers and pulling out their pain points, then distill that into requirements for the engineering team. And guess, by the way, you need to learn marketing and basically all kinds of things. Learn how to build a website and learn how to create marketing materials and videos. And I felt like lost. The thing though was that job I took, the second job, was in New Jersey, not in Canada. I went to New Jersey on a visa. My girlfriend then, now wife, was in medical school. She was also a refugee of the Gulf War, same cultures, etc. And I'm like, today most people would quit. This is not the job I signed up for. But I had no option. If I wanted to be with this girl, which was the biggest, best bet I could play, because I'm everything because of her. She funded our lifestyle while I did failure after failure because she became a doctor. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to make this work. I can't quit. I'm on a visa if I want to be with her. So I started looking for resources to learn about sales and marketing. Back then, 2004 or 5, everything I could find online about digital marketing was from HubSpot's inbound community. So that became my next community. Started like spending time there, hanging out, going to their meetups. Fast forward a few years, my best friend from university calls me to start this company in R&D tax automation, R&D funding automation. And this community that we built, which we call Traction, became our next community. So I went from having no money, but the one thing in my life, my DNA was constant, was community. Now, fast forward 2020, the pandemic hits. We take all our events now from offline to online. Instead of doing regular meetups, we're doing 2 live webinars a week. Rather than doing a virtual conference, one of our conferences got canceled. We took all the speakers and I said, listen, I don't have the energy to do a 2-day virtual summit. I can't sit through it myself. So the other bet we played was, you know what? People are listening to podcasts anyway. Why don't we make it live? So you can watch, you can ask questions, you can interact with one another. And so we started doing these 2 live webinars a week. We'd post the recordings to YouTube and then take the best off and put it on podcast channels. But we never stopped. We consistently did it Tuesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. And it's funny because the offline events combined with the newspaper blog drove us close to 35,000 subscribers. Now taking it online and doing it with a cadence of twice a week took us over the pandemic to over 100,000 subscribers.
Wow.
Because it's the consistency, right? Like I sort of equate it to killing the golden goose. You do one virtual summit a year and it's like killing the golden goose. But if you do one every week, look at the compound interest. All overnight success is nothing but compound interest and consistency. People come, they show up, speakers share it, other attendees share it, and more people show up and they start registering for your events. And over time, the compound interest and even getting like 400 or 500 or 200-300 new people every time you do an online virtual webinar. One is you're getting content that you can slice into multiple formats, your video on YouTube, your audio on podcasts, then shorts, then content for LinkedIn, and then a long form summary for your newsletter. More and more people are engaging. It's spreading. Then there was a window of opening and we wanted to get back at doing a meetup. So we used that window of opening during COVID to host a meetup. Growth equity firm out of New York comes there and they love the event so much. They hit me up saying, hey, we really like the event. We like the audience there. We would love for you to join our venture partner network. Send us deal flow, and in exchange, we'll give you carry in the companies we invest in that you refer. And I'm like, listen, I'm just barely trying to make my life work here between running the company and building this community. I don't have any time to send you deal flow, so I don't think I can do this. And they're like, what's your company? Now, we had called our community Traction because Traction was tied to the aspiration of the ideal customer.
Right.
If we called it the Boast community, I don't think anyone would join because when you have no customers, or you don't have product market fit, or you have a product that's not used very frequently in people's day-to-day, you can't build a community around a product. You have to build it around a practice. Community of practice, meaning people coming together to learn about a specific field to get better at it. So we built a community of practice and we called it Traction because that's what every innovator wants, to get traction. So they couldn't make the connection. And when I told them, they're like, wow, they're like, what does your business do? And I explained it and they're like, you're selling $100 bills for $20 and you have no marketing team. You're nearing 10 million ARR recurring revenue with no marketing team and like 35 people. Can we invest? Now, all my life, I'd only worked for startups that failed. And I knew venture-backed startups is probably not the right route to go. My co-founder, very analytical engineer plus accountant, he was dead against raising money. He's like, taking money is inviting a third person into your marriage. Why would you do it? Unless there's a very, very good reason. On the other hand, my wife's like, you've only worked at companies that are venture-backed and they've all failed. If you do somebody else's zero-sum game and it fails now, then I can't keep funding the family. You're going to have to get a job at a stable company like an Oracle or something. I'm like, so that's what I told them. I'm like, listen, we're not interested in taking investor money. But they're like, we're not traditional VCs. And I'm like, what are you, private equity? They're like, no, we're growth equity. We invest in founders that are bootstrapped and capital efficient with a clean cap table. And so the money we put in, most of it can go to liquidate the founder. So you can de-risk in the short term. And because you're bootstrapped, you own 100% of the company, you'll have enough left to play the long game. And that journey turned into again, the community now getting us early customers to community making us rich. Now, in that time, I mean, we went from having no money to becoming multimillionaires overnight. I should have been happy. I should have been ecstatic. I ended up depressed. I hit rock bottom. I went crazy. And my life just changed. And what got me to sanity was the community. I joined a fitness community, Peloton, and a couple of fit friends, and I went to sanity. And as I started to reflect back, right, I left the day-to-day of the company, joined the board. I'm an active board member at Boast. And I started to think, all my life, I had no money, but I was super happy because I had the community. The only time I ended up depressed was actually when I had a lot of money, but I felt the community was leaving me. And so I wanted to pay homage to the community. And I said, you know what can I do next? I mean, I don't have the passion for another idea. I still love this. This is my tribe. I still own, even after selling half the company, me and my co-founder still own nearly 40%. So I'm like, I still own a chunk of the company. I don't know if I'm going to start another thing, but the best thing I can do with all my free time is write about community. And so I started researching, rewatched all our Traction content over the past years, talked to so many community members. I think the count like hit 1,000 or more, asking the same questions. And then looked into what made some of the most iconic brands enduring over long periods of time. And I found something interesting. Every obscure idea that eventually became a global phenomenon, from Christianity to CrossFit. Every obscure idea that eventually became a global phenomenon went to the same 4 stages. And I tried to distill those 4 stages into 13 rules because I kept running into the same things over and over again from those questions. 13 rules to build iconic brands with community-led growth. And, just to simplify it, those 4 stages that were common to Christianity to CrossFit were people listen to you or buy your product or service, you have an audience. That audience comes together to interact with one another. You bring them together to interact with one another. It becomes a community. Now, when that community comes together to create impact towards a purpose that's much greater than your product or profit, it becomes a movement. And when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time, it becomes a cult or a religion. And that was fascinating to me.
I love it, and I love that last part where you just shared the transition or the process by which a community becomes a cult. Because part of the issue that most people have is they have these customers and they multiply and they have more customers and they multiply and they have more customers, but they don't have that cohesive unit called a community. If there's one bit of wisdom that you might be able to share to get people closer to community from just having clients or customers, can you share something that would be of benefit to them?
Definitely bring people together. I think that's the quickest way to do it. When I say quickest, meaning it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time, and you can't just host one event and stop. It's about doing it over and over again, but find ways to bring people together. See, Doug, we're now sound and sight, and I talk about this science of senses. Anytime you incorporate more than 2 senses, you start to build stronger bonds. I mean, you've experienced this yourself probably, right? Going to in-person events where you feel connected to the people there, and you stay longer. You might stay into the next day. Why are people still at Burning Man despite all of this? Like, they're still hung out, and even when it's back to it, they're just feeling this camaraderie. Or why did people stick through months of the Gulf War in these refugee camps? Because there's something to be said about the senses you experience when you go beyond the sound of sight. You taste, touch, smell. Right? You're shaking hands, you're kissing babies. So start bringing people together. And it doesn't have to be a complex 1,000-person conference like we do once a year. Do meetups, do them at a cadence. Another great example would be Atlassian. This company is 40 billion market cap. It didn't take them like months to do it or years to do it. It took them 20 years to do it. Last year, Atlassian's community came together to self-organize 5,000 events. That touched 500,000 people. Self-organize is the key. They gave their champions the autonomy and the support and the care to self-organize events. If you try to control a community, you can't do this, right? Oh, you can't stretch my logo this way, or you can't do this, or you can't do that, or you have to have this messaging. Forget it. People are not going to show up for you. You got to give them the autonomy. You got to identify who your super fans are and help them get elevated to leader status, right? Every community has this dynamic, even LinkedIn. And I'll give you a very good example, actually, which I experienced recently from LinkedIn. So every community has this dynamic where 1% are super engaged. They're regular contributors. They're your super fans. 9% are casual contributors, and the 90% are lurkers. This is more or less the dynamic in every community, in every platform. Mm-hmm. Your job is to identify those super fans and make them feel special. Yes, they're giving their time and they're contributing, but they want something too. Identify what those motivations are and let them have it, right? At Traction, for example, I don't MC the events. We identify our super fans and let them MC, because we know if somebody's giving their time, they want something. They want either social proof. They want to build their credibility. They want to build their audience. They want to get BD. We don't stop them from that. We let them interact with speakers. We give them stage time, right? When you do that, they get elevated from like super fan to leader status. And it gives the other people who are casual contributors, it shows them the path to become super fans. Now, somebody who's casually contributing and he or she sees like a super fan emceeing on stage, then they start contributing more. And hopefully your hope is someday more of your 90% lurkers start becoming casual contributors and then eventually make that journey to super fan. So a perfect example of this is LinkedIn. They started seeing my content and they reached out saying, hey, we love the content you're sharing. They started featuring 1 or 2 pieces of my content on like LinkedIn news. Like, we love the content you're sharing. Would like to invite you to a LinkedIn bootcamp for up and coming creators. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? Really? And they were like, we'll share best practices. It's invite only. When I joined, there were like 20 or so people who are like very regular contributors. I'm not as regular as many of them because book and everything else. I post maybe once a week. I used to post 2-3 times a week, but nonetheless, my content was hitting like 400 or 500 likes. And since I went on that boot camp, the 4 posts I did after that boot camp, each one of them like nearly hit 1,000, each one of them, because of the things I learned. And the love and the camaraderie I felt there, I'm like, wow, like this is how you do it, right? This is like, I didn't even intend for this to happen. It was like in parallel to me writing the book. And I was just writing about this 90% and, rewarding your champions, converting your super fans into community leaders, etc. And here I am experiencing this firsthand where LinkedIn invited me and they're coaching me now on how to create better content, giving me tips, connecting me with other creators. And I'm like, that's how you do it, right? So I think that is the key. Bring people together, identify your super fans, and give them the autonomy and the love and the care so they can get elevated. When you reward your champions, man, like 1% of your audience will drive the love for everyone else. They'll bring more people.
So before we wrap up, and I appreciate you going into the detail that you do, Lloyd's book is called From Grassroots to Greatness, and we'll make sure we put a link in the show notes so you have access not only to his website, but to Amazon as well. One of the things that I know just from personal experience, not to the degree or to the scale that you have and your partner have experienced this, but I know that success isn't a straight line. I mean, I've screwed up so many times along the way, and my path has been a complete righteous mess. But I know that there are lessons that I have learned that I would probably share with my 20-year-old self and saying, don't go down that path because that will lead you to a dark stop at the end. What are some of or maybe share a key piece of advice that you might provide to your 20-year-old self that was in that mess along the way? Because I know that we all had that mess happen.
2, maybe. 1, all success is a combination of 3 things: communication, creation, and consistency. You may be the best communicator and the best creator, but without consistency, you'll go nowhere, right? I got lucky, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to admit firsthand, Alex and I got lucky. What happened during the pandemic, I'll still chalk it to luck. And a lot of people say, oh, this guy made a lot of money. He's lucky. Yes, they're lucky. I got lucky too. Luck is the 10% that flips the 90% in your favor. Mm-hmm. Luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. You know what the problem is? Most people don't flip enough. We just kept flipping and kept, landing on the risk side. And eventually we landed on the luck side. And that was during the pandemic. Most people don't flip enough. Communication plus creation plus consistency. Just keep flipping. Luck and risk are on different sides of the same coin. Just flip. Don't stop. Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Big advocate of video. I think one of his first videos I saw was during the HubSpot inbound marketing program in 2004. He never stopped. Yeah. That's why he's Gary V. Or Larry Ellison never sold a share of Oracle. He's the richest man in B2B SaaS. So the second thing is, a lot of people ask me, I want to build a community. What should I do? Should I start a LinkedIn group? Should I start a Facebook group? Should I start a Slack group, WhatsApp group? And I tell them, start by figuring out who your customer is and what their pain points are, what value you can add, and then figure out the platform. Asking to start with the platform when you don't understand your customer is like saying, hey, you know what? I want to build a church, but I really don't know for what religion. Or I want to build a home. I want to build a home, but I don't know who's going to live there, right? So start with your people and figure out the pain points. If you do those two things that I described, like communication, creation, and consistency, and start with your people, it will guide you all the way.
All right, man. Great advice. Great conversation. I appreciate you spending the extra time with us in our community. I know that our community is going to get a load of great lessons out of your book. It's called From Grassroots to Greatness. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes. For those of you that are listening in audio, you can't see the video, but he's holding up a copy of the book. That is a sweet cover. Tell me a little bit about the cover. How did you design that?
You know what? I never intended for this cover. My brother, I'm just fortunate. Like, all my life is surrounded by good people. My brother is a brand designer for an agency. He's worked at Leo Burnett, etc. And he's my inspiration in many ways. He told me that your superpower is bringing people together. You don't see it, but wherever you are, people come together. And he told me about my purpose in life. Anyway, my book was called Community-Led Growth. And, it's been very hard for me to read and write growing up. So this took a long time. And he took it as a challenge. I didn't engage him or anything. He's like, I'm going to design your book cover and I'm going to name it. And you watch how you get inspired once I do that. And he was so right. He created this cover. He's like, your book can't be community-led growth. Community-led growth is the mechanism. It's like saying my book is called marketing. Your book should be about the aspiration. And he named it From Grassroots to Greatness. And he designed the cover, and it's full color, right? To drive and inspire people. Community should be about energy, is what he told me. And he said, I'm going to prove to you that the saying, never judge a book by its cover, is BS. And honestly, the amount of reviews I'm getting for the cover alone, and just my energy in the last 3 months since he produced the cover, is just skyrocketed. It's why I wake up and I bring the same energy, and I'm on like podcast number 61.
Yeah, man. I listened to the title that you said. What, community-led growth? Is that what it was when you were named? And I looked at that and I'm like, no, it's so not your cover, and it's not your persona, and it's not your vibe that you share at all. For those of you in our community, check out the link that I'm going to put in the show notes. Also, it'll be a picture of Lloyd, and you'll see he's not a community-led cover, a community-led kind of guy. He is a grassroots to greatness kind of guy, and it looks great. I mean, I love the cover. And that, when I originally saw the cover, I'm like, totally your vibe. And then when I saw your photo, I'm like, oh, that's 100% him. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks for being here on the show today. And again, any final words of advice that you can provide our community would be great. And I'm going to give you the final word, and then we'll head out of here.
Definitely. The only thing I'll say is, we're so fixated on technology and AI and all of this, but I'll tell you, yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. If you build a community, you won't become a commodity. Even OpenAI with ChatGPT and all the buzz, OpenAI wouldn't exist without the community contributing their data to them. They wouldn't exist. It literally wouldn't be a company without the community. If you build a community, you won't become a commodity. Yesterday's innovation always, though, becomes tomorrow's commodity.
All right, Lloyd Lobo, thanks for being here on the show. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
Friday advice and Tuesday interviews with people far more interesting than they are. Fill up your week with the nice guys. Have fun storming the castle.